Hi guys, my name is Liam and welcome to MANNA, the channel where we explore the religious significance of Christian dishes throughout history. And today we're going to be making one of my favourite dishes ever, which is baklava. So baklava is one of my favourite dishes. It's layers of phyllo pastry with nuts, and then it's drizzled in like a honey syrup. It's absolutely gorgeous. But although the dish has survived the test of time, unfortunately it hasn't been historically documented well. So we have lots of different faith groups, cultures, nationalities that all dispute the origins of baklava. But one thing is for sure, the reason they're disputing it is because it's so good. So legend has it that the Assyrians used to stretch out unleavened bread dough and pile on nuts and honey on there for special occasions, and that was in the 8th century BC. But as the dish spread across the world, especially the Far East, it developed other things like spices like cardamom and cinnamon. But the real magic happens when the Greeks got their hands on it. So previously it was stretched out unleavened bread dough, but the Greeks developed a little thin pastry called phyllo pastry, and we can get it anywhere today. But phyllo means leaf because the pastry was so thin it resembled the thinness of a leaf. So the Greeks replaced the unleavened bread dough with the phyllo pastry, which created the baklava that we see today. But it wasn't as accessible to everyone until the Ottoman Empire came along. And the Ottoman Empire spanned so many different countries that in each country, with the expansion of that empire came the expansion of baklava, with each little community adding their own twist on it. In the 17th century, the ruling sultan loved baklava so much that he would gift baklava on the 15th day of Ramadan to all of his soldiers, and this became known as the baklava parade. Now, you're hearing the words Ottoman and Greek and Assyrian being thrown around, but you're probably thinking, what does baklava have anything to do with Christianity? How does it have anything to do with Christianity? Well, the Greeks used to create baklava with 33 layers of their phyllo pastry, and each layer represented 1 year of Christ's life. But similarly, in Lent, they used to create baklava with 40 pieces of phyllo pastry, and those strips were supposed to represent each day of Lent. And it's said that the Armenians argue that the name baklava came from them, because bak in Armenian means Lent and halva means sweet. So this makes baklava the ultimate Lent sweet. So although the origins of baklava are widely disputed in history and today, the Greek interpretation of baklava gives me an excuse to introduce it on this channel. And if I'm being honest, I don't need much of an excuse because baklava is the best. Very short lesson on baklava over, so that being said, let's get baking. So guys, let's take a look at what we are going to need. So we're going to need 200 grams of pistachios, 50 grams of walnuts, 50 grams of pecans, 250 grams of butter, a pot of honey and some phyllo pastry, and you need 2 of these packets. You can get them from Tesco's. So for our syrup, we're going to need 250 grams of golden castor sugar, and then we're going to use the honey again. We're going to need 50 grams for the syrup. Then we're going to need 2 teaspoons of orange essence or orange blossom water, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cardamom. So for equipment, we're going to need a bacon tray. So I got these bacon trays from Home Bargains for 2 for 69p, and they're disposable. Then we're going to need our mixing bowl, a saucepan, a little container to put our melted butter in, our spatula or a spoon, our trusty egg wash brush, a ladle, and lastly we're going to need a knife to cut our baklava with. So the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to throw our butter into the saucepan and just make sure that's all melted down. Then afterwards we're going to pop it in our little container and pop that to the side. Once you've done that, we are going to take our trusty egg wash brush and just lather a layer of that melted butter onto our bacon tray to make sure our baklava doesn't stick to it. Next, you want to blitz your nuts in a food processor. If you do not have a food processor, you can put them in a bag and just give them a good whack with a rolling pin just to break them all down, but you do not want it to turn into a fine powder. You still want a bit of substance to those nuts. Then you are going to add in 3 tablespoons of your honey and give that a mix. Sometimes I like to get my hands in there just to make sure it's all combined. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to measure your phyllo pastry. So when you get your phyllo pastry out, just be very careful because it is really delicate. I put my baking tray on top of the phyllo and with a knife just feel underneath where the edges of the tray are and just make small indentations on the edge of the phyllo, and then I cut it down to get the shape that I want. You're going to notice that there are some offcuts here of the phyllo pastry, but don't worry, they aren't going to go to waste and we are going to use them later. But you'll want to put a damp tea towel on top of these just to make sure the phyllo pastry doesn't dry out. So now that we've got our phyllo pastry all cut out, what we're going to do is we're going to start layering it in our baking tray. Now, to make sure our pastry looks and tastes delicious, we are going to add a layer of butter for every 2 pieces of phyllo that we put down. So we're going to keep doing this until we run out of our pastry. So you'll run out of your first box. So as you can see, I have now got my second box of pastry opened and cut out to the desired shape. Now I'm going to add our nuts in, our honey nut mixture. So you want to get it in there and you want to spread it all out just to make sure every single bit is covered. And then you want to press it down with your spoon or your spatula. So now that the honey nut mixture's in, what we're going to do is we're going to start layering our pastry again. So just like we did before, every 2 layers a layer of butter. And you'll notice that as we get further and further up that baking tray, it becomes a little bit wider. So what you might want to do is you might just want to move your phyllo pastry over to the left or to the right just to make sure that it is touching the edges of the tray. So we're just going to keep doing that until we run out of our pastry, but then you will notice that we do have lots of offcuts from earlier that have been placed to the side and have been sitting under a damp tea towel. You can use these offcuts to keep on building those layers and obviously lathering it in that butter every 2 layers. Now our next stage is to cut our baklava up. Now just be very careful at this point because these tin trays are quite flimsy sometimes, so the knife can poke through whilst you're cutting. Make sure you get right down to the bottom. The advantage of buying this 2-pack is once you have cut it out, you can just pop that tray into the other tray to ensure that there isn't any spillage. Now that that's done, you want to pop this in the oven at 200 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes, and then you want to turn that heat down to 130 degrees Celsius for approximately 40 minutes to an hour. So whilst that's in the oven, what we're going to do is we're going to make our syrup. So you need to put all of your syrup ingredients into your saucepan and add 200 mils of water, and then bring that to a boil for about 8 to 10 minutes, stirring every now and then. So in that time, your syrup should have cooled down, and then bring your baklava out of the oven, and then while the baklava is hot, you need to pour on that warm syrup all over the baklava. Now it's important that it is warm syrup and hot baklava because then it'll all fuse together and it will taste lovely. And there we go guys, our lovely tray of baklava. We've got to wait for this to cool down before we can take full advantage of how lovely it is. But yes, that is how you make baklava. Very well disputed dish, but equally just as lovely. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. If you are a student at St Benedict's, make sure that if you do create any of this, you tag us on the stbenedicts.chaplaincy Instagram page. And I look forward to seeing your creations, and I will see you next week. All right, guys, God bless. Bye.